Now that we've covered all of Kayla's joint-based deformation and all of her local rigs, really all that's left to do is to create some standard blend shapes for her mouth corners and her eyebrows, as well as creating combo shapes for both of those. So in this lesson we're going to cover the actual sculpting of the major shapes for like mouth out, mouth up, brow in or down, brow overall up, down, all that kind of stuff. And then in the next lesson, which will be the final lesson, we'll cover corrective shapes or combo shapes, where you're saying, for instance, when the mouth is out and up, look like this, or when the mouth is out and up and the jaws open, look like this. And using that can be really exciting and powerful. And in that lesson, we're going to go through both doing that through the Shapes plugin, which is a paid program, and we'll also go through how to create them from scratch, which is really, really simple when you get to it. So the first thing I'll do here is I'll just hide this miscellaneous group so it doesn't get in the way. And now I am just going to, actually I'll unhide that for a second because I'm going to duplicate this guy. Let's move it over here. I'll sculpt off to the side for now. And I'll actually just leave this as a duplicate me so I can just grab it from there instead of always coming back down here. So first, let's get started with mouth out, left. So let's call this mouth out, actually L mouth out, TGT. Now let's add this in. We're not going to turn it on to 1 because this is not a local rig. We're just going to be plugging this into a mouth corner control down the road with set driven key. So the first thing I'm going to do here is create some joints to get a good starting point. In fact, we actually didn't have to rename this yet because we are going to duplicate this off once we get the joints into a place we like and continue sculpting from there for the final shape. So let's actually undo back there. We're actually not going to add it as a blend shape just yet. All right. So for now, it doesn't really matter if we rename it, but I'll just call it temp or L temp mouth out. So I'll go ahead and create a joint, 2 joints actually. Put one right around the mouth corner, and the other is just going to be to balance it out, so it doesn't really matter where it goes. These are again temporary, so you're going to delete these at some point, so don't worry about getting too fancy with them. Let's call this head, this mouth. Now I'm going to create a group and center it around this one because we are going to be keying this one as we sculpt. So I'll call this mouth GRP. Again, it doesn't matter. We're going to delete it, but just so we have something to look at. Now we are going to rotate this, and we're rotating this so that we can pull this mouth back along the natural line that it would go. And if you feel this on your own face, it's most likely that your mouth's going to ride right along the outside of the teeth. It's usually around halfway between the actual angle of the face and going straight back. Maybe not halfway, maybe a little bit farther out. So just kind of manipulate this until the angle looks like it would line up well with your character design. Maybe still a little bit too far in. I think that's probably good. You could always pull it a little bit out afterwards. So don't worry about freezing transformations unless you add another null above this, because that'll just reset that. So we're just going to set a key here and then a key farther down where we just pull it straight back. Go pretty far with it. We could always just work within different range here. So now I'm going to grab these two guys, skin it, and flood everything to the head to start. Now the first thing I'm going to do is select a ring and grow it like we've done a few times now. Now we want to be very mindful that we're getting a good area inside of the mouth as well, because that's something that is kind of hard to sculpt on its own because it's hidden deep in there. So that's probably far enough. Actually, we probably don't want that row there, or that ring. All right, and let's definitely get rid of a decent amount of these though. Or you know what? I'll actually start it with this because I don't want to risk upsetting the inside of the mouth that we've grabbed already. So, although one thing I actually definitely want to do is deselect a whole bunch of these screen left side ones, since this is just going to be a shape for the left side of the head. Oops. All right, that's a good starting point. And just flood these. Let's see what that gave us. Okay. Let's just smooth this a bunch, see how it looks. Alright. Now let's just deselect a whole bunch of this side again since it went over a little bit too far. Just grab a chunk there and flood it to 0 and then smooth it. It's actually a Control-Shift-I to grab the opposite selection so that we're not smoothing into that area. Oh, that's not what we wanted. Well, that still works, okay. Maybe just a little bit more. Cool. Alright, that's a really good starting point. Now we're going to start fine-tuning this a lot. For one, you can move this joint around just as much as you want because we're going to be duplicating this off, so if twisting this way helps, you can do that. I definitely suggest adding some vertical scale in there so that the volume comes down with it. And then you can push it in a little bit. Oh, looks like we're doing this on the wrong frame though. You definitely want this to be the extreme. This is the absolute maximum this shape is ever going to hit, so make it pretty far back. You could always duplicate off one in the middle of here if you really wanted to, if you thought it was way too far. Okay. Let's start getting rid of some of this middle influence. Get it to kind of bulge out around where you would imagine the teeth would lie. Also maybe get rid of some of this up here. You definitely want the cheek to be affected, but maybe not quite this much. Okay. Now let's work on the cheek area. Gonna want some more cheek to be pushed back through here. Remember, this is just out. We don't want the cheek to get pushed up yet, because that's going to be our up shape. Oops. Just trying to even this out a little bit. Try to get this to kind of taper off to a point here rather than be so round. That's one rule I'd say definitely follow with these stylized characters like this, is to deal with points and not to have too much in the way of rounded areas, at least for mouth corners. Maybe pump this up a little bit since the mouth is already really far back. Or maybe the opposite. I might just pull that mouth corner down instead. Get rid of these ones. Whoops. In fact, let's grab a big selection and then just get rid of some of the ones around the outside. There we go. Okay. See how we can smooth that. Now maybe add some influence in here. Trying to get it so that the cheek gets pushed past this mouth corner. Obviously, we're going to have to clean this up quite a bit now. Alright, now that we know that's hitting that point, we can go in and start to reduce the cheek influence right after the corner so that we get a nice crease there. Again, this is all relating to your particular art direction for the character you're working on. This is not a set rule for where the crease should lie or how this should look exactly. Alright, that's looking pretty good for a starting point. Let's just add a little bit more throughout here. Something I like to do is to grab some rings this way, right up until the edge loop that we want to actually be the crease. So maybe one more, and then this next unselected one is going to be the one that bulges out. So with these selected, I'll go into replace a value of 1 with the low opacity and start layering in some stuff here. Okay, getting a bit of a nice crease there. I think this is a pretty good starting point. I think I'm about ready to duplicate this off and actually start sculpting on it with the artisan tools. Just a few touch-ups here. Alright. So I'm just gonna duplicate this off. Call it L mouth corner out TGT. And then we can go ahead and delete these guys, as well as the temp. Alright, just unlock this. Now we can go ahead and add this in. Oops, looks like the jaw is open. Oh, it's just because we're farther down here. But just to be safe, when we add this in, I'll just turn these guys off like we have done before. And let's see how that worked out. Cool. Now that we see how it's reacting around the teeth, we're definitely going to want to counter that. If you wanted to, you could duplicate the teeth and bring it up here. In general, though, I think I'm just going to pull out this whole area, just straight out. This way a little. Alright, good for now. Now, the fine-tuning I want to do here is to smooth out the topology here. So let's actually go to our artisan tools. And for now, I'm going to use relax, which is going to try to keep the shape but smooth out the spans. So let's try to keep volume as much as possible, shape as much as possible, but make the topology a bit more clean. I usually just jump back and forth between smooth and relax depending on what I need. Smooth is, it just averages out all the vert positions that you draw over. I think we're losing a little bit of volume in the cheek, so I'll add some of that in. This is with the pull brush. Definitely use some pull over here as well. Something else I like to do, especially for a pose like this, actually before we do that, let's try to smooth out this area a little bit. And let's just grab this and scale it down. This vert's definitely not behaving. Now, the last thing I'm seeing we really need to work on for this, other than some final broad adjustments, is to enhance this crease here. So I'm gonna grab this loop, pull this back, or actually let's leave some of it off, and then keep pushing it back a little bit more. Okay, actually, you know what? Maybe I should start pushing this up and in as well. Cool. Now, before we duplicate this off, it's looking a little ape-like, a little bulbous. So I'm gonna smooth it down a little bit. I mean, as your lips come out, they're not going to completely retain their definition. They're going to lose some volume. and fix that gap we've created. That crease is still looking pretty flat, but I'm not going to waste too much more time in this lesson. I'm gonna call this okay for now, and then we'll just jump over to Kayla and look at the finished version. Okay. Cool. So the finished mouth corner out for Kayla looks like this. See, we've got a lot more definition, a lot more noticeable cheek crease going on there between the area above the upper lip and the cheek. And it all kind of comes to a nice point right here. Okay, we're not going to go through every one of these in this lesson because that would take way too long, but we are going to now create the up pose. And then we're going to play around with combining the up and the out when we get to the next lesson, which is combo shapes. So let's just duplicate this guy again. I think I actually will sculpt directly on this for the mouth. Ideally, it would have actually been a good idea to keep around the joints and that dummy that we had to get a nice starting point by just pulling it straight up, but I've never gotten really far by doing that with mouth up, so it'll probably be just fine if we sculpt it by scratch here. Let's call this L mouth corner up TGT, and I'm just going to grab one of these verts right here, grow the selection a couple times, make sure it gets some area on the inside, then maybe get rid of some of this at the front. Okay. Now let's grab a soft select and pull this straight up. Maybe rotate it a little bit, or maybe not quite that much. Push it back a little. By the way, this is, I think, the absolute hardest shape to make for a character, is the smile straight up, because you want it to be animator friendly, meaning that when you pull the control around, it lines up. So even though you'd never hit this pose, you do want it to go pretty much straight up when you pull the control straight up, and we're really going to rely on our out-up corrective shape to really make your smile look nice later. So you're going to want this to cut pretty much across the whole mouth like a normal smile would do. Start fixing this up. Sometimes it's a good idea to naturally have the nostril raise up a tiny bit during a smile. Sometimes the animators might want complete control of that, but I think it's pretty safe to add just a little bit in it. Makes it a little bit more natural. Push this all back a little. Just a little bit so it doesn't penetrate the teeth. And then let's just continue to raise this up. Try to get pretty high. It is going to start looking a little wonky, but like I said, we're really going to be relying on that out-up shape to make this look nice, because this isn't on model right here. Nobody can smile like this. That's impossible, even for a stylized character. Get it to look as good as you can. Trust me, it's not going to look pretty up in this area right here. It's pretty much impossible to get that shape to look good when it's this close to the nose, but just do your best. Now, one thing we haven't done yet is taken this whole cheek area and raised it up. That's one of the most important aspects of a smile. Grab this area and pull it up. It's probably going to affect your lids a little bit as you're sculpting, but you could always go in and paint a blend shape map to actually just cut this whole eye area out of the available influenced vertices for your smile shape or for any shape. Now notice we're getting a big gap in here. I'm going to pull this out a little and then straight up. Maybe pull this in a little bit so it isn't so it's a little bit more straight. You could actually compress the lower area of the cheek a little bit as well, since that volume is traveling up into the upper cheek area. Just a tiny bit. Alright, and let's just do some relaxing. Alright, we're going to say that's good enough for now. Now, since we're going to be doing correctives in the next lesson, we're actually just going to do some quick brow stuff here. So let's duplicate this off. Call this temp brow. We're going to be deleting it, doesn't really matter what it's called. Create a joint. Let's actually center this. This is going to be a joint that pulls all of our brows completely down in a straight line. Create a dummy head joint to balance it out. Now we actually want our brows to actually be over here for visual representation, so let's grab those. I'm actually gonna bring this guy back to the origin so I can grab them together. Okay, and we're just gonna wrap deform both of these guys to the head for now, just so we can see how the brows look when they're going down. Create deformers, wrap. So now anything we do to these verts should happen to the brows as well, since they're perfectly aligned to the topology. Now let's just give them a layer so we can hide them quickly. Okay. We're not going to be actually painting the brows, we're just going to turn them on whenever we need to make sure they look nice. In fact, you know what I'm actually going to do? I'm actually going to color these faces so that we don't have to be continuously doing that. sure that lines up. Okay. Assign brow. Okay. Now we can yank these around all we want. No real need for these actually, but we have them there if we need them. So the first thing I'm going to do, after we skin this and flood everything to the head as usual, is grab this whole row right here, deselect the areas we do not need, maybe go up to where the straight line ends, maybe right there. Well, I suppose we can go a few further since we're going to grow this selection anyway. Now I'm just going to grow this until maybe halfway down to the lid. Maybe get rid of one more row. Make sure nothing else is selected. Good. Maybe cut these out right here. Okay. Let's go ahead and flood this to the brow. Now let's create a group around this just so we can key it translating without it freaking out. Unparent that too. And just translate this straight down to about there, I guess. Now let's start smoothing this out. So to make sure it doesn't hit the lids, although we could just always paint it out later, I'm just going to go ahead and do an inverse selection here. Okay. And let's Control-Shift-I. Now let's smooth this out. The key that you're always going to be wanting to be shooting for with brows is to keep them straight across as this master control comes down. And the reason we're painting both of them at the same time is so we make sure they look good coming down together, and then we'll just separate them out by painting half of the blend shape black, so that we just have one brow. And when they combine together, they still look good. Although it might need a combo shape depending on if the painting comes out okay. Right, a little too much smoothing. Or, I guess we're gonna have to add that in anyway. So now let's start manually adding. We're just gonna focus on this side when we do some manual stuff because we'll just mirror it over. We might have to actually center this when we go to mirror it though. Before I paint, let's turn off the visual so we can see the color of the brow. Just get this to look straight. Might have to get pretty particular with it. Also make sure you get some nice meat of the brow coming down. You don't really want it to hollow out this area. Especially in this area. Alright, see how that looks if we smooth it a little. Oh, definitely gonna have to keep adding to this corner. And yeah, I'm just gonna not worry about it affecting the lids right now. I'll just paint it out afterwards. Whoa. I'd say aim to be able to get at least halfway down the eye area, if not fully, with it retaining a pretty much straight area of influence. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Now let's focus on the middle area here. Let's actually pull this down farther. Alright, see how this is kind of making a point there. We definitely don't want that. Remember, we're going to sculpt this on our own afterwards, so this is really just to get that good starting point. You're going to want this whole section between the eyes to get really pushed down. Let's go back to 0 and mirror this. I'm not sure if it'll work without it being centered on the origin. Let's just check. Save a new file just in case something happens. Nope. So let's just grab both of these and move them to the center. Hold an X to snap it to the grid. Looks right. Now if we mirror at frame 1, oh boy. Oh, it's because we have keys set. Now let's check on that. Looks right. Oops. So let's actually group these together again so we can move that as a whole. Okay. Okay. I think this is a good point to duplicate this off. Say maybe right around there. Duplicate that. Go ahead and hide this other stuff. Let's call this... You know what? Let's not worry about naming it yet because we're going to have the separate left and right sides anyway. So unfortunately that got rid of our brow color. Let's actually undo a little bit so we can see where that landed right there. Okay. So from here over. Oops. Come on. How about assigning a new material? Okay, it just did not like brow for whatever reason. Okay. So let's get to sculpting this. before I do anything, I'll hold W down, left click, reflection, yes. And in the artisan tools, stroke, reflection. So it should do both sides now. So first let's smooth some of this topology out. Start pushing and pulling. Definitely push some of this up. Although first, let's actually go in and create that blend shape we were talking about. We're going to duplicate this again at the end, so I'm not going to worry about it right now. Or I guess we have to create a new blend shape actually. Oh, looks like we offset our pivots at some point. Grab one of these eye rings, grow the selection a couple times to cover the lid. It should be good. Maybe that's a little too far actually. Well, actually, you know what? I think that's good. Let's go ahead and flood that to 1. Something happened on the ear over here. I was not aware that that happened, but flooding it should make it all good. Alright, now let's just smooth this all out. Cool. Now I'm just going to duplicate it off so we can continue sculpting fresh. And go back to focusing on this area where we're going to create some nice bulging happening in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is drag this whole area down a little bit and then out. Though maybe with a little less influence for the out. Okay. Grab this row, a little bit more, and pull that out. Then maybe pick a row to push in a little bit, or 2. To really enhance that crease. Okay. Just work with your art direction and sculpt this to look exactly how you want your character to look when the brows are both down in the middle, or even when just the inners are down, because we're going to seal that out of that shape, as you'll see in a few minutes. Alright, looks pretty ugly, but we're not going to spend too much more time here. Okay. Now you can make this look exactly how you want. The main reason I wanted to go through this is to show how I go about stealing my other brow shapes from this shape. So if I duplicate this off, and let's say this is going to be my, oh crap. So now that we have that, the way that I would actually go about extracting 1/2 of this is through that same blend shape painting method. So if I create a blend shape on this guy, go to my front view, grab 1/2, oh, let's turn off reflection, and I'm actually going to do the other side so it's the left. Go to paint again, blend shape, targets, flood that to 0. I'm just going to smooth it so it makes a straight line across that middle. I think there is a way to use some other type of math to get this to perfectly merge together. I've ended up having to use combo shapes. I'm not entirely sure how that would work to get a pitch perfect center. I'm actually going to undo a little bit because I don't want the brow getting pulled up with it here. So I'm just going to grab some of the inner rows. That should be good. Just smooth it till it's straight. Maybe add a tiny bit of manual smoothing. Okay. And that's how I extract that. Now from this shape, I'm going to extract the left side brow inner down. And that's going to be very, very simple. So to do that, I'm going to do the same thing. Going to create a blend shape. And instead this time, instead of painting it across the middle, I'm going to paint just the area that will allow the inner down to look correct, or how you want it. Oops. So if I paint right through this area, you'll see that it's all coming down into that same shape that we had created. Make sure you come all the way into this side. Now, you're just going to carefully, it's getting a little sloppy, let's just smooth this out real quick. Okay, so what you're going to do is just balance this area to create a straight line, going from the peak of your brow to that inner area. So you're just going to play around with that until you get that inner down shape. And the reason we do this is so we know that if you lower your master controls and then the inners, it'll add together to still create that same exact inner shape because you're stealing it from the finished master down, if that makes sense. So let's just hop over to Kayla to demonstrate that. So if you bring the master down, you'll see you get that nice shape in the middle there. And then, let's actually raise them a little bit. And then if you, whoops. And then if you lower the inners, it's adding that exact same shape, but just with the outside of it painted out. And of course duplicated off, so they are just shapes together, but they add together to create that same inner shape. So we're not going to go through creating all the brow shapes, there's a bunch of them, but I'll talk about the theory of it a little bit. It's that you have your master control, which brings everything up and down. Your inner control brings the inside down and in if you want, but it stays completely straight so that the animator can be completely in control of that furrow. And then on top of that, you also have a peak control, which controls that overall point. This is just the way that I like to set up brows. I'm not saying it's the best way. There are obviously other kinds of brow setups. It's entirely up to you. And then I add just this one little tweak on the outside, but you're not really intended to use that one too much. So back over here, we're going to ignore the brows, and we're just going to go through the process in the next lesson of setting up the mouth corner correctives. So before we do that, let's actually just connect them into a mouth corner control. So let's get rid of that. Save. And I'll just duplicate one of these off. Obviously, again, it would look, I would spend time making this look all nice for the actual controls in a finished rig, but for the sake of time, we're just going to stick with this circle. And let's call it L mouth corner con. Whoops. Now let's just rotate this so it fits that same sort of position we dealt with before, so that it matches the angle of the actual shape of the out. That should be good for now. I'm gonna use my locator group script, and everything looks good. Let's just parent that to, you know what, back in the previous lesson when we set this guy to automatically open with the jaw, what we actually should have done is set this mouth corner to do that, and then just parented this guy to it. But for now we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to parent it to head bottom. Okay. Oops. I meant to parent the whole group to bottom. Okay. So now we've got that. We're not going to worry about setting limitations. That's super simple. You can just go into the attribute editor, transform node, limit information, and then just set whatever you want your minimum and maximum to be, and then it'll stop it before it goes too far if you want to do that. So real quick, let's just use set driven key. That would be animate set driven key set. And I actually don't think we added our mouth up shape to this yet. So let's add that in. Cool. So we're going to say for translate, or actually we have to load it as the driver first, and for translate Y on this blend shape for mouth corner up, we're going to set a key because they're both at 0. Also, before you do this, always make sure you're set to linear and not stepped or anything over here in animation, or else that's how it'll set it in the graph editor when you do set driven key. Okay, so we set a key here. Now we're going to set one for up. Let's say a value of 4. Set this to 1. Key. So now this guy should vertically control that. Now for X and out, set a key there. And then at about 9, set this to 1. Cool. That's exactly what we want. Okay, so in the next lesson, we're going to deal with combining these shapes into a nice shape, because as you can see, out and up make a pretty gross shape right now. So see you in the next lesson.